I came home that day expecting the same thing I'd lived with for 8 months straight. Dead silence. I slammed my front door, ready to drop my briefcase, loosen my tie, maybe pour a drink and stare at the wall, and then I heard it from the back of the house. Laughter. Not just any laughter, my triplets. My boys laughing like they used to before the night their mother died. For a second, I honestly thought I was losing it. My heart started racing in a way no investor meeting has ever managed, and I followed that sound down the hallway, past framed photos I still couldn't bring myself to move past a playroom full of untouched toys, wondering if I was imagining it. When I pushed open the sunroom door, the world tilted. There was our new live in Nanny Jane on her hands and knees, with a jump rope around her neck, like reins all three of my boys, Rick, Nick, and Mick, piled on her back, red-faced and breathless, screaming with pure joy. She was neighing, sliding across the rug, and these kids who hadn't laughed in almost a year suddenly sounded like real little boys again. I stood there, this supposedly powerful CEO, completely speechless. Relief hit me so hard my knees went weak, and right behind it came shame. Some woman I barely knew had just done in one afternoon what all my money and experts had failed to do for months. Jane saw me and the sound cut off like someone hit a mute button. The boys slid off her back and pressed against her sides like they knew she might need backup. "Mr. Scott, I'm sorry, we were just playing. I should have kept it down," she said, cheeks flushed, breathing hard. I should have told her it was the best sound I'd heard since the funeral, that I could have listened to that all night. Instead, my throat locked, my eyes burned. I gave a stiff little nod and walked away before I started crying in my own doorway. To understand why that moment messed me up, you need to know where I was coming from. My name is Benjamin Scott. On paper, I'm the billionaire tech guy with the Manhattan office and the Greenwich mansion. In real life, I was a widower who watched his life implode when a state trooper knocked on my door and told me my wife Amanda had been hit by a drunk driver while she was out buying medicine for our sons. 1 hour, I had a loud, chaotic house full of crayons, and off-key singing the next hour, I had 3 little boys in dinosaur pajamas asking why mommy wasn't coming home. You think grief is crying all the time, but the worst part, at least for me, was the silence that came after everyone else went back to their lives. After the funeral, our house went quiet and stayed that way. The boys stopped laughing first, then they stopped playing, and pretty soon they only talked when an adult dragged words out of them. They moved through rooms like ghosts, and every night I watched them get a little smaller, like they were trying to take up less space in a world that had suddenly turned dangerous. I did what guys like me know how to do. I tried to fix it with resources. I hired one of the best child psychologists in the state. I bought every book on childhood grief people recommended. I built routines, schedules, therapy appointments, healthy meals, outdoor time, all of it. People in suits told me I was doing everything right. But every evening I still walked into a house that felt like a tomb and tucked 3 quiet boys into beds that used to be surrounded by laughter. My mother-in-law, Patricia, finally told me, "You need help at home, Benjamin. Someone who isn't afraid of a sad house." While I was buried in meetings, she found Jane Morrison, 27 years of nannying and housekeeping references that called her steady and kind. At the bottom of her handwritten application was one line I didn't even notice at first. "I understand grief. I won't run from it." Patricia emailed me the file I skimmed for the word experience, said, "Sure, hire her," and went back to arguing about numbers because it was easier to obsess over quarterly reports than admit I didn't know how to father kids who were falling apart. That's how Jane came into our lives. Through the side door of my denial, quietly folding laundry and cooking dinner while I stayed late at work so I didn't have to walk into that heavy, quiet house. For weeks, she was just the nanny in my head, someone I nodded at on my way out. After the sunroom, I couldn't treat her like background anymore. That night, I sat alone in my dark home office, city lights smeared across the window, replaying that laughter until my chest hurt. Around 2 in the morning, I opened her application again and actually read it. I saw her age, her Boston address, the steady references, and then I hit that line. I understand grief. I won't run from it. And it landed like a punch. Most people had gently backed out of our lives after the funeral because they didn't know what to say. Jane had walked straight into the heaviest house in the neighborhood and gotten down on the floor to be a horse. You know what I mean? There are people who send cards, and there are people who show up and sit in the mess. The next morning I came downstairs early, telling myself it was for an overseas call, but really listening for that sound. Instead, I heard eggs sizzling and kids' voices. Jane was in the kitchen barefoot, hair shoved up in a messy bun, moving around my expensive appliances like she actually lived there. The boys shuffled in, saw her, and lit up. "Jane, can we play horse again?" Mick asked. She stiffened when she saw me in the doorway. "Good morning, Mr. Scott," she said. "Morning," I answered, and then added, "It's Benjamin." Her shoulders dropped just a little. The boys begged about the game again. She looked at me, clearly expecting a no. The old version of me would have given a speech about boundaries. The man who had heard his sons laugh for the first time in months heard himself say, "After breakfast." 3 little jaws dropped. Then they cheered like I'd just announced Christmas. I sat at the end of the table pretending to check emails and watched her talk with them about their dreams and favorite dinosaurs and little stories about Amanda they'd been scared to say around me. She didn't shut them down or change the subject. She just listened like every word mattered, and in that ordinary moment, something shifted. For the first time since the funeral, I let myself believe we might not be stuck in this dark place forever. The more I saw, the harder it was to stay emotionally checked out. I started coming home earlier by accident, and would catch them in the yard reading or on the floor, building elaborate block cities where, as I overheard, sadness, monsters aren't allowed. She never looked to see if I was watching. She was simply there with them in a way I hadn't figured out how to be since Amanda died. Late at night, I still wandered the house like a ghost, past Amanda's mug on the counter, and her handwriting on the grocery list stuck to the fridge. One night I noticed a light on in the library. Jane was curled up on the leather couch with a thick book, bare feet tucked under her. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. We ended up talking quietly, and for the first time I said out loud, "They laughed yesterday. Really laughed. I haven't heard that sound since," and I couldn't finish. She did it for me softly, since Amanda. Most people treated my wife's name like a tripwire. Hearing it spoken without flinching felt like someone had opened a window. She told me the boys talked about their mom with her all the time. How she smelled like flowers and coffee. How her singing was terrible and perfect. How she sometimes let them eat dessert first. Tiny memories I'd buried under the way she died. I sat there blinking back tears, thanking her for remembering my wife through them. A few nights later, I found her at the kitchen table after midnight, shoulders shaking, clutching a small silver locket. Inside was a photo of her little girl Hope, who had died of leukemia at 3. Jane told me about hospitals and test results, and a husband who blamed her until the marriage collapsed. "This is all I have left of her," she said. "So when your mother-in-law told me about 3 boys who lost their mom, something in me said either go help them laugh again or drown in your own quiet." In that moment, I realized she wasn't just helping my sons heal, she was surviving too. If life were fair, the story could have ended there. 2 broken adults, 3 slowly healing kids, a house filling up with small joys again. But the twist came from exactly where you'd expect when a wealthy white widower and a young black nanny start looking like a family. Other people's mouths. A neighbor snapped a picture of us at the farmer's market, and a gossip column ran it with a cute caption about the handsome tech titan and his very devoted nanny. At a charity gala, another CEO's wife leaned in and said, "You know people are talking, right? 3 little boys, a widower, a live-in nanny. Think about the optics for their sake." I smiled politely, but I heard the warning. Then the school called. The fancy academy where I'd enrolled my sons left a polite voicemail about concerns from other families and how, given the recent attention, it might be best to delay the boys' enrollment. They framed it as protecting my kids. What I heard was, "We don't want whatever story people are telling about your nanny anywhere near our donors." Driving home, all I could think was, Jane will hear about this and decide she's the problem. I went straight to her guest room. The door was open. Her suitcase was on the bed, half full. "Don't do this," I said. She didn't even pretend she wasn't leaving. "Your sons just got pushed out of school because of me," she said quietly. "I'm black, I'm young, I'm staff. People see me holding their hands and think scandal, not family. I promised myself after my daughter died, I would never love another child like that. But your boys, I couldn't help it. And now they're the ones paying." She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes full of tears, and said, "I know how this story gets told in neighborhoods like this. I become the headline, they become the punchline. I won't do that to them." I dropped to my knees in front of her. This man who's used to everyone standing when he walks into a room, and asked, "What if you didn't have to leave? What if instead of hiding you, I told the truth about who you are to us?" She held my gaze and said, "Who is that, Benjamin? Say it, because I am not surviving being treated like I made this up in my head. You know that feeling when the next sentence might blow up your life either way? That was me." Finally, I said, "Your family. You're the person who walked into the darkest season of my life and refused to run. You're the only one my sons trusted enough to laugh with. And I need you here as much as they do." She started crying harder. "If I stay, I'm not hiding," she said. "I'm not going to pretend to be less so other people are comfortable." "Then my world needs to change," I told her, "not you." A few weeks later, was in a national interview that was supposed to be about a product launch, when the reporter asked about the woman caring for your children and the public speculation. Every PR instinct screamed at me to say no comment. Instead, I said, "Her name is Jane Morrison," and I told the truth. I said she was the reason my sons were still emotionally alive. I said the way some people talked about her said more about race and class than anything happening in my house. I called her family on camera and said I wasn't going to apologize for my kids being loved by someone who didn't fit a neat little box. The interview went viral. Half the internet called me brave, half called me reckless. My board called an emergency meeting about reputational risk and what it might do to our stock price. I told them I already lost my wife. I'm not losing my son's joy to make strangers more comfortable. If our stock can't handle me telling the truth about the woman who saved my family, maybe the stock is the problem. Yeah, that came out of my mouth in a room full of people who worship numbers. That night, I found Jane at the kitchen table with her laptop open, watching the interview with tears streaming down her face. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You could lose everything." I already lost everything that mattered once I told her. I'm not doing it again by staying quiet. She stood up and hugged me like someone grabbing onto a life raft, and for the first time since Amanda died, I didn't feel like I was falling alone. 6 months later, we cut a ribbon on something which neither of us had the experience to build. The Hope and Amanda Foundation, a residential space for families with kids in cancer treatment, in the east wing of our house that had sat empty since my wife died. We named it after both of them, her daughter and my wife, because their absence is why we understand that kind of pain. The place has counselors and playrooms and quiet corners where parents can cry without being told to stay strong. On paper, I'm the big donor and Jane is co-director. In reality, she's the one on the floor with the kids, the one looking parents in the eye and saying, "I know." I signed guardianship papers making her the legal guardian of my boys if anything happens to me, but honestly, she's been their Mama Jane in every way that counts for a long time. At the dedication, I handed her those papers on stage, and my sons ran up and wrapped themselves around her legs, while a courtyard full of people clapped. I watched them and thought, this is my family now. Not the one I planned, but the one that grew in the wreckage. And that evening, we sat in the garden, the boys chasing each other between the flowers Amanda planted, and I told Jane there was a long stretch where I was sure God had just walked off and left us to drown. Watching her laugh with my sons, I wasn't so sure anymore. She wiped her eyes and said, "I don't know about all that, but I know grace when I feel it." A minute later, the boys came tearing back, yelling, "Papa, Mama, Jane, come play," and the name didn't hurt. It felt right, like it had always been waiting in the wings. From the outside, some people still only see a scandal. The billionaire and the nanny lines crossed world upside down. From the inside, what I see is 3 boys who learned it was safe to laugh again, a woman everyone underestimated, who turned out to be the backbone of a family, and a whole building full of hurting strangers, and a man who finally decided gossip columns and stock prices weren't worth more than the people sitting at his kitchen table. So I'm curious, if this played out on your street, at your kids' school, in your company, which side would you have been on? The whispers about the help getting too close, or the side that says love is bigger than job titles, race, and other people's rules? Tell me in the comments what you think. Did I cross a line? Did she? Or did the line need to be moved in the first place? And if any part of this hit something in you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's been judged for who they love or how their family looks. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do in a world full of opinions is refuse to hide the people who helped us find our way back to life.